This is my true story. I spent my whole life raising my children, cooking, cleaning, and sacrificing everything so they could have a better life. I thought in my old age they would show me respect, but instead they turned me into a joke. On Halloween, they dressed me up in silly clothes, painted my face, and paraded me in front of neighbors like I was nothing but entertainment. I forced a smile, but inside, my heart broke. What they didn't know is that I would not stay quiet. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my stories can reach more people. I was not born into comfort. My childhood was filled with hard work, with small meals, with days where my hands cracked from scrubbing floors and carrying loads that were too heavy for my back. But even in those days, I promised myself one thing. When I had a family, I would give them everything I could. And I kept that promise. From the moment my first child was placed in my arms, I poured my whole being into being a mother. I fed them before I fed myself. I worked jobs that paid little, scrubbing, mending, cooking for other people, and taking in laundry so my children would never go hungry. Every coin I earned, I thought of them first. Shoes for their little feet, notebooks for school, medicine when they were sick. As the years passed, I became the center of the home. I was the one who kept birthdays alive with cakes made from scratch. I was the one who sewed costumes for school plays. I was the one who stayed awake when fevers ran high. When they grew older, I still stood behind them, paying for college books, slipping money into their pockets when they thought no one was watching, helping them rent their first homes. And when grandchildren came, I took them in my arms with the same love I had for my own. I babysat, I cooked, I rocked crying babies through the night so their parents could sleep. I was the grandmother who showed up with meals, with warm blankets, with open arms. For me, family was not just blood. It was duty. It was love in action. Every meal cooked, every floor cleaned, every penny saved was my way of saying, "You are not alone. I am here." I never expected luxury in return. I never asked for riches or great gifts. All I ever wanted was respect. Respect for the years I gave. Respect for the nights I stayed awake while they rested. Respect for the sacrifices that shaped their lives. Holidays were always special to me because they were moments when everyone was gathered together. I believed those days were proof that my effort had been worth it. Proof that we could sit as one, laugh as one, and remember we were a family. Thanksgiving, Christmas, even simple Sunday dinners, they were my treasures. I cooked feasts not because I wanted praise, but because feeding my family filled my heart. I decorated, I cleaned, I set the table as if I were preparing for royalty, because in my eyes, they were my royalty. So when Halloween came, I believed it was just another chance to be together, to smile, to share joy with my children and grandchildren. I looked forward to it with a heart that was still soft, still eager to belong. I thought we would hand out candy, laugh at costumes, maybe watch the little ones run around the neighborhood. I thought my presence, even in my old age, still meant something to them. I thought my years of devotion had secured a place of honor in their lives. But I was wrong. What I did not know that night was that my love, my years of sacrifice, my endless care had been forgotten. They no longer looked at me as the woman who carried them, who fed them, who gave them everything. They looked at me as something else, something less, a joke, a propriedad, an old woman whose dignity could be played with, mocked, and displayed for others' amusement. I had spent decades believing that if I gave and gave, one day the love would circle back, that when my hair turned gray and my hands trembled, I would not be alone, that my family would see me, respect me, protect me. I believed this so deeply that I ignored the small signs, the dismissive tone, the rolled eyes, the sighs when I asked for help. I told myself it was nothing, that they were tired, that they were stressed. I held on to the dream that at the core, they still saw me as the heart of the family. But that Halloween, everything changed. That night showed me the truth. I was not the loving matriarch in their eyes. I was not the woman who sacrificed her youth, her health, her comfort to give them the life they lived. I was not the center of the family anymore. In their eyes, I was just entertainment, a thing to laugh at, a costume to parade, a body to mock. And the sharpness of that realization cut deeper than any knife. And yet, even in that moment of betrayal, my love for them lingered like an echo, because that is who I am. That is who I have always been. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who gave. But deep inside, something else was beginning to grow, something I had buried for too long. Not hatred, but resolve, not bitterness, but the strength to say, no more. That night, I stepped from being the loving matriarch to a woman who finally understood. Love without respect is not love at all. Halloween came, and instead of warmth, I was greeted with something else. My family said, "Grandma, we have a costume for you." Their voices were excited, but not in the way that comes from love. It was sharp, mischievous, like they were hiding a joke I didn't know yet. I thought maybe they wanted me to dress up to make the children laugh in a sweet way, maybe as a witch with a funny hat, or as a grandmother fairy, something gentle, something kind. I thought maybe it was a way to include me in the fun. So I smiled. I said, "All right then, what is it?" Because I wanted to belong. But when they brought out the clothes, my heart sank. They handed me an oversized shirt, one that smelled musty like it had been pulled from an attic box. They gave me pants so large I had to hold them at the waist to stop them from falling. Then came the hat, wide, floppy, ridiculous, with feathers sticking out at odd angles. And then the makeup. Oh, the makeup. They painted my cheeks bright red, smeared lipstick outside the edges of my mouth, and drew heavy black circles under my eyes. I sat there, still, while they worked, laughing the entire time. They said things like, "This will be hilarious," and "She looks like a real clown already." I wanted to tell them to stop. I wanted to say no, but I did not. I forced a weak smile and sat still, telling myself, maybe I was imagining the cruelty. Maybe they were just trying to have fun. But it wasn't fun. Not for me. I felt every brushstroke as a cut across my dignity. I felt every giggle as a weight on my chest. When I looked in the mirror, I did not see myself anymore. I saw a fool dressed by the hands of those I once fed, clothed, and carried through storms. They stood behind me, whispering and laughing, treating me not as their mother, their grandmother, their elder, but as a puppet. The worst part was not the clothes, not the hat, not even the smeared makeup. The worst part was the look in their eyes. They didn't see me. They didn't see the woman who worked until her bones ached so they could grow up safe. They didn't see the one who skipped meals so they could eat. They didn't see the one who stitched clothes by candlelight because there was no money for new ones. No, they saw only a clown, a character, a joke. And so, with my dignity slipping away like water through fingers, I stood up when they told me to. I let them take pictures. I let them laugh. I told myself, it's just one night. Endure it. Endure it like you always have. Because that has been my way my whole life. Endure, survive, sacrifice. But deep inside, a fire was starting to burn. Not the fire of anger, not yet, but the fire of realization. Because in that moment, I knew. They had forgotten who I was. They had forgotten what I gave. They had forgotten the mother who once shielded them, the grandmother who once nurtured them. They thought of me only as someone to dress up, parade, and laugh at. And while I forced my lips into a smile, my heart whispered the truth. This was not family anymore. This was humiliation dressed as fun. And I sat quietly, knowing this was only the beginning. They did not stop at the costume. No, once they had painted me, Once they had stuffed me into those clothes, once they had laughed enough among themselves, they decided the whole street needed to see. "Come on, Grandma," they said, tugging at my arm like I was a doll. "We'll show everyone how funny you look." I wanted to say no. I wanted to stay inside, hide my face, wash away the paint, take off the hat, and put my dignity back together. But they didn't ask me. They pulled me. They guided me out the door and into the cold night air. The neighborhood was alive with Halloween. Children ran around in costumes, witches, superheroes, ghosts. Parents stood with mugs of warm drinks, talking and laughing while keeping an eye on them. Laughter already filled the air, but when they saw me, their laughter changed. It wasn't warm laughter, it wasn't gentle, it was sharp, cutting, like knives. People pointed, some chuckled behind their hands, some shook their heads. I heard whispers, "Why would they do that to her? And poor old woman, look at her." And worst of all, I heard children, not strangers, but my own grandchildren, shouting, "Grandma's a clown, Grandma's a clown." Each word hit me like a slap. Each giggle from their little mouths was like salt rubbed into the wound. These were the children I once cradled in my arms. These were the little ones I once fed with soft spoons of soup when they were sick. These were the ones I once kissed goodnight, praying over them as they slept. And now they looked at me not as their safe place, but as a circus act. My family recorded everything. They held their phones high, snapping pictures, taking videos, making jokes. "Look at Mom," they said. "She's the funniest one here." And they paraded me down the sidewalk like a trophy, showing me off to neighbors. I heard the clicking of cameras, the flashing of phones. I felt my face burning under the heavy makeup and the eyes of everyone around me. I tried to keep my head up, to pretend it did not hurt, but my body betrayed me. My shoulders slumped, my hands shook, my feet dragged slowly, not from weakness, but from shame. I could feel my dignity leaking out of me with every step. I could feel myself shrinking smaller and smaller while their laughter grew louder and louder. And in that moment, I realized something important. They didn't even see me cry. They didn't notice the tears sliding down my cheeks, mixing with the painted makeup, turning it into streaks of red and black. They were too busy laughing, too busy showing me off, too busy making me their joke. That was when I understood. This wasn't just a Halloween prank. This wasn't just fun. This was who they had become. People who could take the woman who raised them, who gave them everything, and turn her into a clown for their amusement. I stood there in the middle of the street, the cold air biting my skin, the hat sliding over my eyes, listening to the laughter. And inside my chest, something hardened. The part of me that still hoped they would respect me, the part that still excused their cruelty as stress or carelessness, it cracked and it died. All that was left was the truth. I was not loved here. I was tolerated, mocked, and displayed. When they finally dragged me back inside, my body felt heavier than it ever had. Not because of the costume, not because of the paint, not even because of the hat pressing down on my head. It was heavy because my heart carried shame. They went inside laughing, replaying the videos on their phones, sharing them with friends. I went inside silent, already planning. Because while they thought they had made me into a joke, they did not realize they had given me the one thing I needed most: evidence. And with evidence, I would have the last laugh. When the door closed and the neighbors went home, I thought the cruelty would end. I thought maybe, just maybe, the mask would come off, the makeup would be wiped away, and they would laugh it off and let me rest. But I was wrong. Behind closed doors, it became worse. Because outside, at least the laughter came from strangers. Inside, it came from the people who were supposed to love me. They did not let me change. They made me sit in the living room in that ridiculous costume while they ate their dinner. My daughter smirked as she put her phone down on the table, playing the video of me stumbling on the sidewalk over and over. The children screamed with laughter, banging their fists on the table like it was a show. And then they turned to me. "Do the dance, Grandma. Do it again. I shook my head, said softly, "No, I'm tired." But my son-in-law leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Do it, or you won't eat." The words struck me harder than any slap. Food. The same food I used to cook for them. The meals I once stretched from nothing when money was short, now dangled in front of me like a prize I had to earn by humiliating myself. I looked at my daughter, hoping she would stop him, but she only looked away, pretending she didn't hear. My own child. The same girl I once rocked to sleep when storms scared her. The same girl whose school shoes I polished so she would never feel less than anyone else. Now she sat there, silent, letting her husband make me into their clown. So I danced. My legs ached, my arms trembled, but I shuffled and waved because the hunger in my stomach burned worse than the shame in my heart. The children clapped and jeered, throwing scraps of food at me like I was an animal in a cage. "Again, again," they cried. And when I tried to sit, my son-in-law barked, "Not yet." Later, when I thought it was finally over, I went to my room, but they weren't done. They banged on my door, ordering me back out. They made me wear the hat again, made me stand in front of their friends who had come by to visit, and perform little tricks like a circus act. Every time I hesitated, the threats came back. "You'll go hungry. We'll lock your door. We'll tell everyone you're losing your mind." That night, I lay in bed with my stomach half full and my soul empty. I stared at the ceiling, hearing their laughter echoing in my head. I could still feel the weight of the paint on my skin, the crumbs of food they had tossed at me stuck in my clothes. And in the darkness, I realized they no longer saw me as their mother, their grandmother, their family. To them, I was just a joke, a servant, a puppet to pull out when they wanted amusement. It was then, in that quiet moment, that something inside me shifted. I stopped hoping they would change. I stopped telling myself to be patient, to forgive, to wait for kindness to return. I knew it wouldn't. Not anymore. What I faced wasn't thoughtlessness. It wasn't stress. It wasn't a bad day. It was cruelty, deliberate, sharp, and repeated. And cruelty only grows when it isn't stopped. So I decided, enough. I would not let them destroy what was left of me. I would not let them keep laughing while I shrank smaller and smaller. They wanted to make me into a clown for their entertainment, but I would make them into something far worse, an example. Because what they didn't realize was that while they mocked me, while they shouted their orders, while they threatened me, I had my phone. I had pressed record. Every word, every laugh, every threat, every demand was captured. The world would hear how they treated me, and the world would not laugh with them. It would judge them, it would condemn them, and it would break them the way they thought they had broken me. That night, I fell asleep with a strange kind of peace. For the first time in years, I knew what I had to do. I woke up the next morning still wearing that ugly makeup they had smeared on me. My face itched, and when I looked in the mirror, I saw not a grandmother, not a woman, not even a person. I saw a clown staring back. The hat sat on the chair in the corner, the silly hat they had shoved onto my head while they laughed. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at myself, and the tears came slowly, one by one. Not loud sobs, just quiet tears, the kind that come when your heart is too tired to fight anymore. I touched my cheek, remembering all the years I had cared for them. I thought of the nights I stayed awake sewing clothes for my daughter so she would look neat at school. I thought of the mornings I walked in the cold to clean houses so I could pay for her textbooks. I thought of the meals I skipped so my children could eat more, and now here I was, painted up, paraded, mocked, treated like less than a human being. The weight of all those memories pressed down on me, and something inside me cracked. That was the moment I knew. The love I had poured into them was gone. It had not disappeared overnight. It had drained slowly, like a bucket with a hole at the bottom, drop by drop over the years of disrespect, indifference, and cruelty. And Halloween night was the last drop. The bucket was empty, and so was I. I sat on the bed, staring at my hands. They were old now, wrinkled, veins visible under the skin. These were the hands that once braided my daughter's hair, that once wiped her tears when she was afraid of the dark. These were the hands that worked until they bled, scrubbing floors and washing clothes so that she could live in comfort. And now, those same hands were shaking, not from weakness, but from anger. I realized something important in that moment. Love does not mean allowing abuse. Forgiveness does not mean accepting humiliation. And family does not mean blind loyalty when there is no respect. I had spent my whole life believing that blood was enough, that being family excused the pain. But no more. I would not live the rest of my days being treated like a toy, a burden, a clown. That morning, as I washed the paint off my face, each stroke of the cloth felt like peeling away the years of humiliation. The water turned murky as the makeup came off, and with it, my fear washed away too. By the time my face was clean, my decision was clear. I would never let them do this to me again. I would never give them another chance to laugh at my pain. I had reached my breaking point, and breaking, I realized, was not weakness. Breaking was power. Because once something breaks, it cannot be forced back into its old shape. That old version of me, the silent one, the patient one, the forgiving one, was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone ready to fight. I did not scream. I did not confront them that morning. I did not throw plates or shout insults, though every part of me wanted to. I was calm, because calm is stronger than rage. Calm is colder. Calm carries weight. I ate my breakfast quietly. I let them talk and laugh like nothing had happened. I nodded when they gave me chores. I played along, and all the while I knew what they didn't. Their days of control were numbered. They thought they had broken me that night, but really they had set me free. Free from the illusions I had clung to, free from the fear of losing them, free from the chains of obligation. They had shown me who they truly were, and I had finally accepted it. That acceptance became my weapon. By the time I went to bed that evening, I was no longer the same woman who had been paraded through the neighborhood. That woman was gone. The new me was waiting for the right moment to strike. And I promised myself, as I closed my eyes, that when I did strike, it would not be with anger or shouting. It would be with truth, with exposure, with the very proof of their cruelty that I carried in my phone. They had turned me into their joke, but I would turn them into their own downfall. They thought I was helpless. They thought I was too old, too weak, too broken to fight back. But what they forgot was this. I may be old, but I am not stupid. I may move slower, but my mind is still sharp. And I had something stronger than anger. I had proof. They had filmed everything. They were so confident in their cruelty, so proud of their humiliation, that they left the evidence everywhere. Phones on the table, laptops open, cloud accounts connected and syncing. They thought the videos were funny, a family prank, a silly memory. But I knew better. I knew what those videos showed. Abuse, plain and simple. That night, when everyone was asleep, I sat quietly in the dark with my phone in my hands. I had already recorded some of their words, the threats, the laughter, the commands, when they ordered me to dance, when they told me to beg for food, when they laughed and said I looked like a circus freak. I had captured it all. My phone became my shield, my witness, my silent ally. But that wasn't enough. I needed more. So while they slept, I walked quietly into the living room. Their laptop was open on the couch. I sat down slowly, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from determination. I clicked, and there it was, the folder, videos, pictures, all labeled. They had saved my humiliation like trophies. My fingers hovered over the mouse for a long time. My heart pounded in my chest. Part of me wanted to delete it all, erase it so no one would ever see me like that again. But another part of me, the stronger part, whispered, "No, don't erase it. Use it." So I copied everything, every video, every photo, every ugly piece of evidence. I took a small USB stick from my drawer, the same one my grandson had once used for school projects, and I filled it with the files. One by one, they loaded onto it, each one heavy, each one like a nail in the coffin they had built for themselves. When it was done, I sat back and stared at the little device in my hand. It was small, so small, but it carried their shame, their cruelty, their betrayal. It carried the truth of how they treated me when no one was watching. It carried the proof I needed to show the world what they really were. I slipped the USB stick into my pocket and went back to my room. I lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling, the stick pressing against me like a hidden weapon. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. Not because I had strength in my arms or speed in my legs, but because I had the truth. The next morning, I acted as though nothing had happened. I made breakfast. I cleaned. I smiled faintly when they spoke. But inside, I was holding a secret they could never take from me. They laughed at me. They mocked me. They thought I was powerless. But the truth was sitting in my pocket the whole time. And with that truth, I could destroy the life they had built on lies and cruelty. I didn't rush. Revenge, I realized, is not about speed. It is about precision. You wait. You prepare. You strike when the moment is right. I watched them for days, pretending, listening to their laughter, their mocking, their endless disrespect. Each laugh made me stronger. Each insult made me calmer. Because I knew their day was coming. The evidence was mine, and it was enough to turn their lives upside down. The next morning, I didn't sit at the table with them. I didn't cook their breakfast. I didn't answer their laughter. I got dressed quietly, put my shoes on, and slipped the small USB stick into my pocket. My heart was calm. My hands were steady. I had decided it was time. I walked slowly to the bus stop. Every step reminded me of the night before, of the makeup on my face, of the laughter in my ears. But this time, instead of humiliation, I felt resolve. I wasn't going to beg them to stop. I wasn't going to cry in my room. I wasn't going to sit quietly like a prisoner in the house I had built with my own life. I was going to speak, and I was going to speak where it mattered. The bus ride felt longer than usual, but I didn't mind. I held my bag close to me. I could feel the USB stick pressing against the fabric, small and cold. My weapon, my proof, my freedom. When I reached the police station, I stood outside for a moment. The building looked ordinary, plain brick walls and a flag above the door. But to me, it looked like a fortress. A place where truth could finally be heard. A place where I could stop being a joke and start being a person again. I walked inside. The air smelled of coffee and ink. Phones rang in the background. Officers walked briskly across the floor. Papers shuffled. A young woman behind the desk looked up at me and smiled politely. "Can I help you, ma'am?" she asked. "Yes," I said firmly. My voice didn't shake. "I need to report abuse." She paused, glanced at me, then nodded. Within minutes, I was sitting in a small room with an officer. He wasn't young, but not old either. His uniform was neat, his expression serious. He asked me gently to explain, and so I did. I told him about the Halloween night, about the costume, about being paraded in front of neighbors, about the laughter, the pointing, the photos. Then I told him about what happened when the door closed, about the tricks, the dances, the threats, about being told I wouldn't eat if I didn't obey, about being locked in my room like a child, like a prisoner. He listened without interrupting. He nodded slowly, writing notes. When I paused, he didn't rush me. He simply said, "Go on." Finally, I reached into my pocket. I placed the USB stick on the table. My hand stayed there for a moment before I let go. It was heavy, heavier than it should have been. They recorded everything, I said. My voice was calm, flat, certain. They thought it was funny, but this is what they made me do when no one was watching. The officer looked at the USB stick, then back at me. His jaw tightened. He picked it up carefully, like it was fragile, like it was important. And it was. "We'll look into this immediately," he said. His tone wasn't just polite, it was firm, serious, professional. He wasn't brushing me off. He wasn't treating me like an old woman with a complaint. He was treating me like a victim of a crime. And that was exactly what I was. When I left the station, I felt lighter. My legs didn't ache as much. My back didn't feel as bent. The weight I had carried for so long, the silence, the shame, the humiliation, had shifted. It wasn't mine anymore. It was theirs. It belonged to the people who had hurt me, the people who thought I would never fight back. As I walked home, I thought of their faces, the smugness, the laughter, the whispers, and I thought of the moment they would be called in, the moment the officer would show them what I had shown him, the moment their world would collapse. That thought didn't make me smile. It didn't fill me with joy. It filled me with peace, because I hadn't just told a story. I had told the truth, and the truth finally was going to do what I couldn't. It did not take long. Within 48 hours, the police arrived at the house. I was not there when it happened, but I know exactly how it went. The same neighbors who laughed when they saw me dressed like a fool now watched as officers knocked on the door. The same street that heard their laughter now heard silence. My family did not understand at first. They thought it was just a routine visit. But when the officers stepped inside and began asking questions, their smiles died. They asked about Halloween night. They asked about the costume. They asked about the videos. My family tried to laugh it off, saying it was just a harmless prank, nothing serious, just family fun. But then the officer placed one of the videos on the table. Their own voices filled the room, laughing, shouting, mocking. And then came the threats, clear, sharp, undeniable. The room went quiet. There was no way to twist it now. Neighbors were also called in to give statements. Some said they had seen me outside, dressed like a clown, looking humiliated. Some said they had seen my face, pale and forced into a smile. Others admitted they heard shouting from inside the house when the door was closed. Every word from them became another nail in the coffin my family had built for themselves. The story spread quickly. In the neighborhood, people whispered. At their workplaces, people stared. The videos that were once a joke among friends became evidence of cruelty. The same friends who had laughed began to distance themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with people who abused their own mother, their own grandmother. At the police station, more evidence was reviewed. The USB stick I gave them had everything: the cruel jokes, the threats, the commands, the moments where I begged them to stop. The officer told me later that it was enough to move forward with charges: emotional abuse, coercion, neglect, public humiliation, all backed by video, audio, and witnesses. When my family realized the weight of what was happening, panic set in. They called me over and over again. First, their voices were angry. "How could you? How dare you?" Then their voices turned desperate. "Please, Mom, don't do this. Your family. We didn't mean it. It was all just for fun." But I did not answer. Their words no longer mattered. They had spent years turning me into an object of ridicule, into a servant, into someone to be controlled. Now, for the first time, they were powerless. The silence between us was louder than all their shouting had ever been. Soon, their friends stopped visiting. The invitations they once received dried up. People crossed the street to avoid them. Their proud image of being a happy family was shattered. Their children faced whispers at school, teachers looking at them with pity. My daughter-in-law's job began to crumble when her employer heard what had happened. Nobody wanted to be associated with cruelty. My son, the loudest voice in the videos, was called into HR at his workplace. They told him his behavior, even in private life, was unacceptable. Within weeks, he was suspended. Then, finally, he was fired. The family that once laughed at me now lived in shame. The same house where they had mocked me was now heavy with silence and fear. Every time the phone rang, they thought it was more bad news. Every knock on the door made them flinch. They no longer controlled me. Their lives were being controlled by the very truth they tried to hide. And I? I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I simply breathed. For the first time in years, I felt air fill my lungs without the weight of their cruelty pressing down on me. I knew the fallout had only begun, and they would live with the consequences of their own actions. Because humiliation, once exposed, cannot be undone. And the shame they tried to put on me now belonged entirely to them. After the police visits, after the neighbors whispered, after the jobs began to slip from their hands, my family turned their anger into begging. They called every day. My phone would ring at all hours. Sometimes it was my son, his voice shaking between rage and desperation. "Mom, this has gone too far. You can't do this to us." Other times it was my daughter-in-law, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Please, it was all a misunderstanding. You know we love you. We were just having fun. Withdraw the complaint. Tell them it was nothing." I never answered, not once. Silence became my weapon. Silence became the mirror that showed them their own faces. Each time the phone rang, I looked at it, then placed it back down. My hands did not shake. My heart did not soften. I remembered the laughter as they paraded me in front of the neighbors. I remembered the threats in the dark when they thought nobody could hear. I remembered the makeup smeared on my face, the shame burning in my chest, the tears I had to hide. No, they had chosen cruelty. And now, I chose silence. They tried letters, slipped under my door, sent by mail, written with trembling hands. At first, the words were full of excuses. "You misunderstood. It wasn't abuse, it was family fun." Then the words changed. "We're sorry. Please forgive us. Please stop this." Later, the letters grew cold. "You're ruining us. We'll never recover. Why would you do this to your own family?" I burned each letter without reading past the first lines. Silence is heavier than any word. They expected me to scream, to argue, to fight. That way they could twist it, blame me, say I was bitter or unstable. But silence gave them nothing to twist. Silence forced them to sit alone with the truth of what they had done. When we crossed paths, at the market, on the street, they avoided my eyes. The proud voices that once ordered me around now spoke in whispers. Their laughter was gone. Their smiles were gone. They were shells of themselves, eaten alive by shame and fear. And I walked past them with calm steps, never slowing down, never looking back. The officer called me once, asking if I wanted to pursue the case to the fullest extent. I said simply, "Do what the law requires, nothing more, nothing less." That was all. No extra words, no bitterness, just silence. That silence carried louder than all the insults they once threw at me. It was the silence of finality, the silence of a door closed forever. And they knew it. When the storm settled, I was no longer in their house, no longer in their shadow. I had moved into a quiet senior community, a place where people greeted me with respect, where I was not a joke, not a burden, not an object for laughter. Here, when I walked into the dining hall, people smiled because they were glad to see me, not because they wanted to mock me. The difference was like night and day. For the first time in years, I felt human again. I filled my days with peace. I joined a small gardening group, planted flowers with steady hands, and watched them grow each morning. I walked slowly around the grounds, and nobody complained that I was too slow. Nobody pushed me. Nobody ordered me around. When I spoke, people listened. When I sat, people sat beside me with kindness. I was not invisible. I was not a clown. I was myself. Meanwhile, the family that once paraded me as a joke was left to face the consequences. My son lost his job. My daughter-in-law's friends no longer invited her anywhere. Their children, my grandchildren, whispered at school, shamed by what their parents had done. The videos that they once thought were funny had turned into poison. They destroyed everything they tried to build, all by their own hands. And I did not need to lift a finger beyond telling the truth. Justice did not come with shouting. It did not come with revenge shouted into their faces. Justice came in silence, in patience, in the steady weight of truth. They thought I was powerless. They thought I had no weapon. But I had the sharpest weapon of all, proof. Proof that cut deeper than anger. Proof that spread faster than lies. Proof that made the world see them as they truly were. Do I miss them? Number blood does not excuse cruelty. Family is not about who shares your last name, but about who respects you, who values you, who treats you with dignity. They lost that right the night they painted my face, shoved me outside, and laughed as the world pointed at me. They lost that right when they treated me as entertainment instead of a mother, instead of a grandmother. Now my holidays are quiet, but they are warm. I spend them with neighbors who treat me kindly, with community members who invite me to their tables, with people who do not see me as a burden, but as a friend. And I smile. Not the forced smile they once demanded of me, but a true smile, born from freedom. My final thought: they dressed me like a clown. I exposed them as monsters, and in the end, justice gave me back the dignity they tried to steal.